Hey everyone, thank you for joining me as mentioned, giving up your valuable time to talk about PER and indeed how you can sort of resolve this sort of conundrum or little puzzle. That's how I like to look at it. Before we go into the detail here, I want to ask you a question, every one of you a question. We've got quite a few people on the call, and this is an important question. And please feel free to pipe in through the chat box, okay? And my question is this. When students arrive at the sort of PER stage, whenever that is, what do you think the biggest concern is for students, or the biggest worry? Okay, I'm interested to hear what you think. I think I know, but what do you think? What is the biggest concern for ACCA students in relation to the PER? Have I done enough to meet the standard? Okay. How to start and what to write? Yeah, lack of support and resources. Okay. Anyone else? These are good. These are good. I'm going to pipe in with what I think in a moment. Anyone else have a comment? These are good. I like these. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Not enough variety at work. Okay. Absolutely 100%, particularly the narrative with one or two people. I think the key point is, I have some experience. When I submit my application, as it were, when I submit my application, is it going to get through? In other words, is it going to be approved by the ACCA? And the reason that I would suggest that that's the key concern is, I've had conversations and discussions with so many different students, ACCA students over the years, in relation to this very area, and indeed to CMA students, and indeed students from other professional bodies. This whole PER issue causes students a lot of stress, a lot of grief, absolutely. Now, why do I ask that question? Well, here's why. Because if you remember just one thing from tonight's webinar, I want you to remember this, okay? Thinking when you start off on this PER application in a way that it may well be that my experience isn't good enough, or my experience isn't good enough. Yeah, I don't have enough accounting or finance background to be able to get through this. Thinking like that, yeah, puts you on a sticky wicket, yeah, from the off. Okay, so my suggestion, and remember that this is a practical webinar. This isn't just about, oh, here's the technical detail. Okay, thinking like that, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay, the way in which I want you to think about PER and this whole area, yeah, is excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold, is that the PER for you in the main, yeah, is a writing exercise. And when you kick off on your application, yeah, and you're looking at, let's say, your curriculum vitae, or you're thinking about your jobs, et cetera, over the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you're thinking, oh, I think I'm in trouble. Don't think like that. I think that you have to approach the PER in the positive. In other words, you have to say to yourself, the bottom line is that I have to make my experience work for the performance objectives. Not that, oh, from the outset, my experience is no good. It's just not good enough, more than likely. Now, you may be sitting there wherever you are in the world thinking, what are you talking about? That's a bit strange. Surely it either is or it isn't. In other words, surely my experience is good enough to satisfy the performance objectives, or it isn't. I don't agree with you because I think, and remember, as mentioned, I've assisted and guided and broadly sort of coached a number of different students in these areas over many, many years since I've been lecturing, 12 years. And what I've seen is that this is a writing exercise. You might even think of this as a final examination, yeah, a bit like the ACCA exams that you've been doing, where you have to produce a document that satisfies the assessors, signed off by your supervisor. Yeah. Now, a proviso. Am I saying, yeah, am I saying, given the fact that you've been listening to me for the last couple of minutes, am I saying that if you've been working for 6 months as an accountant, and prior to that, for 2 years, you were, for argument's sake, working in McDonald's, and then prior to that, you were unemployed, and then prior to that, you weren't working at all, yeah, or you were traveling, yeah? Am I saying that that person, yeah, i.e. that scenario, can be worked through just with good writing skills and producing a good document? No, I'm not saying that, yeah? What I'm saying is, if you give me a student, yeah, that has reasonably relevant experience for a minimum of 3 years, yeah, perhaps a little bit more, in or around the areas, yeah, of the performance objectives, of which there are 9, some specific, some highly technical, then the chances of them being able to write out a solid PER application are fairly good. Does every single student, are they all guaranteed? No, they're not. But what I'm trying to convince you of is that actually the bar, yeah, may not be as high as what most students think. I haven't met, to be honest, too many students that are just about to start with their per application who are saying, I'm absolutely positive my experience will be fine. I don't think I've met too many at all, if any. In other words, it's a natural thing when you've been through this examination journey and you get to this final hurdle, think, there's going to be a problem. There's bound to be a problem. Well, how about we think in the opposite? No, there isn't. Yeah. This is a writing exercise where we need to narrate and indeed use our experience in finance, in accounting, etc., and put it down in the right way on paper and tick some other boxes, the supervisor, the length of time, 3 years, etc., etc. So if you take 1 point away, as mentioned, from tonight, take that point away, okay? Now, outside of what I've just said, what are we going to do tonight? Well, I'm going to screen share with you, okay? I have a mind map that I've produced, which really takes you through the basics of PER. In other words, what's online? What's on the ACCA website? What do they tell us? Okay. Now, once we've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through what I would call sort of some hacks. Yeah. Some sort of, I don't know, inside information. In fact, I'll probably do that throughout the webinar, but I'll leave the most of it towards the end. Yeah. And I'm going to focus with those hacks on 2 main areas. The first area is the experience requirements, yeah, or the performance objectives. Yeah. And the second area is the supervisor. Okay. Because for me, those 2 things are the most important things to focus in on. There's other stuff as well. Yeah. But those 2 things are the most important thing in order to put yourself in a position that you get success at the end. Okay. Final point before we start is do take this exercise seriously. Okay. Consider it, as mentioned, a little bit like an exam. Students on occasion get their applications rejected by the ACCA for different reasons. Yeah, not just because they haven't got the experience, but because the document, the narrative, isn't very good. Yeah, one thing that I think you should do, in fact, you must do, is when you produce, yeah, your document, note before it goes to your supervisor, get it checked, get someone else to read it, a colleague, a friend, your mom, your dad, get it checked, yeah, and get their view. They may not be an accounting person, it doesn't matter, yeah, get it checked, get one person, maybe two, to read through your document before it goes to the supervisor. Okay, this is good advice. This needs to be well written, well presented, well structured. You know, I do think that this whole ACCA per area, and I know that students get stressed about it because I've been speaking to them about it for 12 years. I do think there's an element of it, not all of it, but there's an element of it that hinges on the old phrase. Sometimes it isn't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Okay. So you've got to make sure that you produce a professional document that ticks those boxes. Okay. So that's the sort of gen on what we're going to do. As Hugo mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A towards the end. I'd say ballpark about 10 minutes or so. I'm happy to run over the allotted 1 hour time if we need to do that, no problem at all with me. And I really do hope that, you know, tonight, in terms of our objectives, I'm really hoping that you get something out of this, and I'm hoping that maybe one of the hacks, yeah, or one of the little pieces of advice that I have, or maybe all of them, will really help you nail this down. Because certainly when I've interacted with students over the years and I've assisted them or given them some guidance, this could have just been in passing in a class, or maybe I helped them one-to-one or something like that. More often than not, yeah, the advice, if they put it into practice and they put it into play, they get a good result at the end. Okay, so everything that you're about to hear over the next 20, 30 minutes or thereabouts comes from my practical experience and indeed my students' experience of submitting successful ACCA per applications. Okay, I hope that makes sense, everybody. Now listen, I'm going to screen share with you now. It's a mind map. It's not too long, okay? I'll go through it fairly quickly, and I believe, but don't quote me, I believe that this particular mind map is going to be available to you in terms of a PDF format after the webinar, well, certainly within 24 hours of the webinar. So everything you see on screen, if you miss something, if you're not sure, I believe that the PDF and indeed the recording will be available. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I don't think I am. Okay, so let me screen share with you now, and I probably, oh, 1 second. Okay. Okay, good job. Okay, now I'm hoping that you can see that okay. Would you pipe in on the chat for me, or would somebody pipe in on the chat? Yeah, just telling me that you can see that. Okay, let me know. You can see my screen, which has a sort of a yellow bit in the middle, my starting point, and indeed some branches. Cool. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Everyone can see it. Okay, let's kick off now. I'm sort of limited for real estate, so I have to move some stuff around. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, let's go. So let's start. So unpacking the ACCA per, you know, a big worry for students. Let's talk a little bit about an introduction, indeed, what we're going to cover. Okay, really 5 main points. The first one is really the basics. Okay, what are the basics of ACCA per? Well, several things really. The first thing is, in order to obtain membership, and some of this you'll already know, but I'm starting from the ground up, assuming no knowledge. ACCA membership, 3 things, okay? The exams, the ethics and professional skills module, and then a per application. Okay. One key point, just so you know, I know I'm tangenting a little bit here, but do know that in relation to ESPM, this particular model, do know that the ACCA, based on results at the strategic level, yeah, tell us that the student that completes EPSM prior to any of the strategic level papers has a 25% more or higher chance through and passing. Okay. So the idea of doing that module first, yeah, before you do strategic level papers, apparently is a good idea. Now, that's what the ACCA tell us. I can tell you that in my experience, I really haven't dealt with too many students who've gone that route. I have to be honest with you and tell you about my experience. Generally speaking, with most students that I deal with, they actually do the EPSM at the end. In other words, after their final exam. But, you know, trust the ACCA. This is based on past results, but I haven't pushed it with students. So that's up to you. Okay. Now, the third one obviously is what we're about tonight. Outside of that, excuse me, why do we have a PER? Why do, I mean, if you've been through this tough period, doing lots of exams, some tough exams, you may have started at the very beginning, yeah? You may have started at the first exam, the foundation level, and gone all the way through. Why do they put this at the end? Why do they put in another hurdle? Several reasons. What they're trying to do this PER, obviously, is assess you outside of the examination sphere. Yeah, not just your skills and knowledge, but also your behaviors and judgments. And this supports the point, yeah, that I made from the off, that this is a writing exercise, number one. But number two, students tend to, understandably, they tend to undervalue themselves. They tend to think, even though they've been through so many different exams, even though they've passed, you know, SBL, they've passed ATF, etc., they still tend to think, because they haven't got that stamp yet of ACCA membership, yeah, they think that maybe they haven't got the skills, or they haven't got the knowledge, or the judgment isn't any good, yeah, and they shouldn't think like that. Because if you're at the end of your ACCA studies, you've pretty shown a lot of resilience, a lot of persistence, and more than likely, some pretty good writing skills too. And they're going to come in handy. Outside of that, this area of workplace performance, we know that in terms of the way in which the ACCA, particularly at the strategic level, the qualification has changed. It's morphed. They brought in case study exams, starting with the SBL. We now have this whole thing starting in September 22, the whole skills area, with students pulling their hair out, thinking, skills? What skills? I don't understand this. So this PER, if you will, is like icing on the cake to reassess these areas. Because remember, the only reason that the ACCA examinations changed with effect from the SBL onwards in terms of bringing in all these skills marks is because of employers. Employers wanted it. They want people with more skills. Yeah. So in essence, the PER is really you proving broadly what we already know. It's about you putting down on paper, yeah, what we know already, which is that it's highly likely if you have a broadly relevant role in accounting or finance, it's highly likely that you're going to be able to tick the boxes required for a successful PER application. If, and I'll say it again, if the document is written correctly, well structured, presented well, and checked, not just by the supervisors, yeah, but by one or two other people. Remember what I said from the off. This is a writing exercise. It's not just an experience exercise. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this, okay? This will be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. You give me two students, yeah, with exactly the same experience, broadly speaking, yeah, that sort of ticks the boxes. You give me one that produces an ACCA per application that's badly written, that doesn't big them up, yeah, and give me another student that is a very well-written document that's been checked, that does big them up, yeah. The one on the right, this one, is going to get approved. The one on the left isn't. Weird. Exactly the same experience. That's what I'm talking about. This is a writing exercise, everybody. Okay, let's move on. Key steps. Now, much of what you'll see in this mind map is taken from information that's readily available online. Yeah, some of it is really my own take. But the ACCA suggests to us, and I'll show you the PDF in a moment, and you probably read it already, that there are 5 key steps to getting a successful application through. And I'm going to take you through them. Okay. Next key point. I'm going to take you through what I would call, after we've been through point 2, the 5 key steps, just a few points, some hacks. Yeah. If you will, some sort of fairly cute advice, some important advice based on my experience. And indeed, point number 4, I'm going to do the same in relation to the supervisor. And the reason that I've chosen those 2 areas, because those are 2 of the 5 steps, is that what I've seen in the past is, outside of students not thinking that they've got the experience when they probably have, but sometimes they choose the wrong supervisor, yeah, or they don't manage the relationship with the supervisor as well as they can. Things change, supervisors leave, yeah, and I've got some advice for you in relation to your supervisor, or should I say supervisors, okay? Final point is going to be the Q&A, and as I say, I welcome any questions at all in relation to what I cover in the webinar, or indeed something that's been on your mind for a little while that you're thinking, I'm really not sure about this. Okay, so there's the setup, 5 key points. Let's launch in to the steps. Now remember, this is available online. I'll show you the PDF in a moment. I've just taken what I think is important. So what are the 5 key steps, yeah, that the ACCA advise in relation to a successful application? Well, step number 1, surprise, surprise, is gain the relevant experience. Okay, now what do they tell us about relevant experience? Well, the first thing is that, strictly speaking, it has to be experience in the area of accounting or finance. If it is not, we have a problem, and there's no amount of writing skills or hacks or coaching that's going to help you. Okay, but accounting is a broad area, so is finance. Okay, what's the next thing that they emphasize? Full-time is not required. Okay, if you find yourself working 4 days a week, working half a day every day, all is not lost. We just need to pad it out a bit and make sure that we get those, or the equivalent of 36 months or 3 years of experience. Final point there is that, given the first 2 points, yeah, it seems to me, and indeed the ACCA are kind enough to emphasize this online on their website. Listen, let's relax here. There's many different routes to getting a successful application in. You know, the whole process of ACCA PER is riddled with flexibility, yeah? So let's not approach it. Let's say we're starting it today. Let's not approach it in the sense of, I'm done, you know, they'll never believe this, or I don't think my finance experience is that good. Let's not do that. There's many ways to skin a cat, okay? So let's focus on aiming for a successful application, not starting at the point where I think it's not going to work. They're going to reject it because, you know, self-fulfilling prophecies have a way of coming back at us and kicking us up the ass. Okay. Now, what do we mean by flexibility? Well, you know, any organization, any sector, any industry is relevant. Yeah. In addition to that, even prior to joining the ACCA to do your studies, any role that you've had, and remember, that could be 10 years ago. Yeah. That could have been any form of role at any point. You could have been still at school and perhaps doing some sort of role that might have been relevant. Okay. And indeed, outside of that, no internships and, interestingly, volunteering, yeah, can also be relevant, as can, for example, lecturing up to 12 months. So in terms of this experience, and I will be talking a little bit more detail about the main 9 areas, there's an intro and a flavor, i.e., for what they want. Okay. Let's look at the supervisor area. Now, remember, I'm just introducing it here. I'm telling you, these are the basics in relation to the supervisor. Okay. We're going to talk about hacks and some cute business a little bit later. Okay. Now, first key point, what is the role of the supervisor? Okay. Well, several fold. Obviously, to supervise and indeed sign off the experience, and indeed, over and above that, to vouch for the 36 months or 3 years. Okay. Second part of this is some key points. What are the key points that the ACCA provide in relation to the supervisor? The first point is that normally it will be your line manager. Normally, doesn't have to be, but normally it will be. Second point, you can have multiple supervisors, okay? And that may be relevant to point 3 and indeed point 4. Point 3, technically, yeah, to sign off experience, the individual supervisor must be a qualified accountant, okay? Now, if this is an issue, all is not lost, because remember I talked about flexibility. I talked about this whole ACCA per requirement and indeed application being quite flexible. So what do I mean by that? Well, if the line manager isn't qualified, let's look at another manager. Let's look at a consultant in your office who has some sort of knowledge of your work. Let's even look to an external accountant or an external auditor. Yeah, as mentioned, there's a number of different ways you can come at this. And let's remember that, let's just say that you're working in some form of role, and let's play devil's advocate. Let's say that there's nobody who's a qualified accountant in your organization. Relationships, remember, are important. Yeah. In other words, the relationship, for example, between your firm and the external accountant, or the relationship between your organization and a consultant who may be a qualified accountant. So there's a number of different possibilities. Yeah. So let's try and think in terms of solutions, not problems. Okay. Now, next key point is that in terms of signing off the time, yeah, i.e. the 36 months, note, yeah, that signing off the time, the supervisor does not have to be a qualified accountant. The experience, yes. The time, no. Okay. Important distinction. Excuse me. So steps 1 and 2 we've just covered. Yeah. What do the ACCA advise in relation to step 3? Well, they basically say start recording. In other words, start recording within the My Experience section of your ACCA account and basically track your progress. Now, there's a couple of points on this that I'll mention when we talk about the hacks. This area is important. What I'm talking about specifically is, should you be doing your PER around about when you do your first exam? In other words, should you do it all the way through your ACCA studies, bit by bit, or should you wait until the end and do it as a job lot? Okay, so that's one question that we need to answer when we think about and talk about the hacks. I have some thoughts on that in a moment. Okay, other than that, in relation to the recording, obviously the employer's details, name, address, etc., and indeed your specific role, including dates, are shown within the application. And then final point is that any supervisor, yeah, needs to be registered within the system, and that will involve an email or their details going into the system, an email going them, and then registering first before they are able to sign anything off. Okay, more of that in a moment. What is step 4? Well, step 4 is the target performance objectives. Several things to note, okay? There's 9 in all, okay? 9 performance objectives in all. 5 essential ones, okay, which in my opinion are reasonably straightforward to deal with. And then on the flip side of that, 4 technical areas, which you choose from a range. And I'm going to show you the range of possible options in a moment. What are the key points in relation to these 9 performance objectives? Well, the first thing that we should be doing in relation to the technical side is obviously trying to link the technical objectives that we choose to our work, obviously. Yeah. In addition to that, before we get to the end of the application, we have to complete or write a statement in relation to the elements of the task to ensure that we've done what we're supposed to do. And then final job, as it were, is to alert your supervisor to get them to access what you've written and indeed to sign it off. Okay. Next key point. This is their 5th step. This is what they say on the site. ACCA says just keep going. In other words, there's an assumption on the ACCA's site, in effect, that students will start this exercise probably around about when they start their studies, if they are in relevant experience at that point, and really do it all the way through over several years. Okay, more of that in a moment. Okay, now there's the 5 key steps. Now I'm going to take you through or show you briefly, yeah, a couple of PDFs which are readily available on the ACCA side. The first one, I guess, relates to this whole area of the performance objectives, and guess my sort of inside track on that. Bear with me 1 second. Let me just stop the share and let me get this ready for you. Bear with me. I was under the impression that I had it ready, but for some reason, okay, here we go. I might just ask you, excuse me, if you can see this. Okay. Okay, I might just get the other 2 PDFs just to give you a good spin on this. I mean, these PDFs, I would suspect, if you've done any cursory research on this whole area of power, you will have seen them already, of course, but no harm in reminding you. Okay, so let me screen share, and if you don't mind, do let me know again if you can see my screen. So you should be able to see the words essential performance objectives. Can you see that okay? You can see? Yeah? Are we good? No problems? Cool, great. Okay, thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Lucy. Okay, so what you've got here, I'm not going to go through every single PDF, but I'm just going to show you what's available. So this first one is called the quick guide. You've probably seen this. So this is quite a short, just a few pages, just a flash intro to PER. Yeah. This one here is the training guide, a little bit longer, about 12 pages, got quite a lot of stuff in here for sure. But the one that I'm going to focus on is this one. Okay. The performance objectives. Okay. Bear with me 1 second. In fact, actually, let me just go back to this for a second. Bear with me. Excuse my cold. I have a really, really bad cold. Okay. This is really what I want to show you, not the other one. Okay. So if you can see on screen right-hand side here, you'll see the 5 main essentials. Yeah. Now you have to complete all 5. Back to that in a moment. If you look down the page, you'll see the technical ones from number 6 all the way through, yeah, to here. Whoops, to 22. Yeah. Now, my point is this in relation to what I said earlier on. Okay. If you recall, what I said was that in terms of the essential areas, yeah, these for me are what I would call fairly loose. Yeah. And what I mean by that is a savvy student who knows how to write well, who gets their document checked, can tick these boxes without a tremendous amount of effort at all. Let me give you an example. Some students might look at number two, stakeholder relationship management, and think, well, I mean, I just do my job. I don't get involved in stakeholder management. Nonsense. Of course you do. Of course you get involved in stakeholder relation management. You're dealing with stakeholders every day of the week. Different people, different departments, possibly suppliers, another. You know, this idea that these areas, the essential areas, are in some way beyond anyone who works in accounting and finance doesn't stack up for me. Yeah. Another area is, let's pick number five. Students might look at that and say, leadership and management. Well, I'm not a leader. You know, I'm just an accounts clerk, or no, I've only been with the firm for a few years and I had an accounting job a couple of years ago. You know, it's going to be very difficult. No, it's not. You know, leadership and management is quite broad. Have you ever helped a colleague? Well, then you're sort of leading and managing. Have you ever trained anyone, even for half a day? Then you're leading and managing. Yeah. So my point is that many of these, and I'd certainly include ethics and professionalism in my synopsis there, these areas are straightforward. We just need a written narrative that emphasizes, yeah, your good points, if you will, bigs you up. Yeah. So anyone who suggests to me, if you give me a student that has, you know, reasonable experience in accounting and finance, all of these should be just a fait accompli. Yeah. All of them should be. It's just a writing exercise that brings out areas of your experience that support these areas. Okay. Now, the more trickier bits, obviously, are making sure that in the areas of the technical side, that you choose the right ones. What I've seen with students who come into difficulties in this area, sometimes, not every time, but sometimes they're not careful enough in terms of the technical areas that they choose. And they choose areas just willy-nilly, start writing, get part of the way through and think, oh no, this is not going to work. I don't think I've chosen the right ones. Well, maybe we should have been a little bit more careful at the outlet, at the outset. Now, what am I suggesting you should do? Speak to people, other ACCA students, a lecturer, a colleague at work who's ACCA qualified, a friend of yours who's speak to people who've been through this or who'd be able to concur with you in relation to the four areas that you can choose. I mean, some of them are quite straightforward. You know, for example, when we think about record and process transactions and events, I mean, if you're working in any sort of accounting type role, clearly you choose number 6. Yeah. One or two others, you know, are straightforward as well. I would say under the management accounting side, monitoring performance. That's a very, very broad area. That could mean absolutely anything. And it's highly likely if you have any form of accounting, financial or otherwise experience, you probably have ticked that box. Now, it gets a little bit more specific. Obviously, the areas of tax for sure, audit indeed as well. But my view is, let's be careful, number one, about the areas that we choose. And number two, let's speak to someone before we finalize those areas. In other words, before you start writing at all, what do you think? These are the areas. And you know a little bit about me, or you did a PER. What do you think? Yeah. This is absolutely key. We have to be smart about this. We don't want to start the exercise off and realize that we've got to do an about turn and do more writing. Okay. Now, outside of that, I just want to re-emphasize the point that really the writing of the narrative, which underpins these areas, is really the core of the PER, isn't it? And it needs to be well written. And for it to be well written, yeah, you need to take time. Okay. You need to spend time. If you think about it, and as mentioned previously, this is a little bit of about like an exam, yeah, that's got no time limit. You can spend loads of time on this. So I'm not suggesting you should write a thesis, but I'm saying focus and concentrate when you're doing this exercise. Don't rush it. If you rush this exercise, the chances of it being well written are slim. Yeah. So break it up, one by one. Get it checked, as I said, by some colleagues, not the supervisors. Yeah. Some colleagues. What do you think? Is it well written? Does it tick the boxes in your view? Etc. etc. This is like an exam with no time limit. Take your time. Okay. And indeed, when you're writing out your PER, structure it well, present it well. I go back to the point that I made earlier on. Sometimes in business, in academia, and in life, generally speaking, it isn't what you do. It's the way that you do it. We need a professionally written document. I didn't talk about your experience at all there. I'm talking about the document. I've seen PER applications in draft form that have not been particularly even well written. Some even haven't been spell checked. I mean, this is crazy. This is a document that you're submitting to say, please welcome me or admit me to this elite group so I can bounce around the world with those letters behind my head. Why would we not submit the perfect document? Well structured, well organized, spell checked. Come on. Now, let's move to the next little part here. I need to push on. This area, there's several points here in relation to the supervisor. Now, some of these you'll buy into, some of these you'll think, well, that doesn't sound right to me. I'm cool with it. Take what you will, take what you think is relevant. As mentioned to you earlier on, I think that the choice of supervisor, is important, okay? And remember that the supervisor doesn't necessarily have to be your line manager, yeah? The supervisor or supervisors, simply need to be someone, people that can either vouch your experience, or vouch your time, or both, okay? Now, several points here outside of what I've just said. In students worry about supervisors and worry about, whether or not they're going to approve the experience. This is why choose the right person, or someone that you have a good relationship with is quite important, okay? And indeed, someone that knows your work, okay? One key point here, or hack, that I think is important, and I've seen students fall foul of this. Now, it may lose a little bit in translation, but let me give you a worst case scenario. Let's just say that a student has chosen a supervisor, maybe the supervisor has improved some stuff, and then maybe something has happened in work. Either the supervisor's left, or the employee leaves, or gets sacked, or this or that and the other. Everybody, I mean, relationships, in the workplace are very important, okay? If you're in a position where you're flowing through the ACCA qualification and you're having to ask people to be a supervisor to verify your experience or your time, let's keep good relationships, please, with everybody. Don't be putting yourself into position when you're midway through your ACCA qualification or at the end when you're burning bridges, because that's not going to help. It's not going to help us, okay? So be careful about the management of relationships at work. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, what's that got to do with anything? If I want to leave, or if I don't like it. Well, the way I see it is you need these people. Yeah, you need the supervisors. We can't have a position where we have, let's say, a supervisor who signed off a particular part and then doesn't sign off the rest of it. Yeah, we can't have that. So choose carefully and manage relationships carefully. And do remember that the ACCA are aware that things change. Am I suggesting to you stay in the same employer, make sure your supervisor stays, get upset if they say, no, I'm leaving next week? Not at all. It doesn't matter where your supervisor is, or if they've left, or if you've left, yeah, as long as you keep on good terms. So let's say that scenario does come into play. Let's say you've chosen a supervisor, you've left the firm, or they've left the organization. Keep in touch. You need these people. Manage the relationships carefully. Okay. I've seen students fall foul of that and get into a bit of bother. Yeah. There's no need. Yeah. This is some common sense. You need these people. Okay. Right. Excuse my cold. Let's go for the Q&A now. I'll stop sharing because we're kind of tight on time. A little bit tighter than I thought we were going to be. Okay, so I would be happy to take any questions through the chat that you'd like to put to me. Are there any questions? Let me just take a quick look at the Q&A. Okay, Rosa, you're asking in the Q&A about submit one by one or have to submit all of them in one application. Okay, you have to submit all in one application, Rosa, in one application. Okay, you can get them approved by supervisors one by one, but ideally you submit in one application. Okay, I hope that helps, Rosa. Let me know. Okay, anonymous attendee. If we're unlikely to gain enough varied experience in our current role, can we draw on experience from previous employment or voluntary work? Anonymous attendee, yes, you can. Absolutely. From both previous employment and voluntary work. No, they can be just a qualified accountant, Betty, as long as they are designated by the CCAB as a qualified accountant. They don't have to be ACCA qualified. A qualified accountant is good enough. I hope that helps, Betty. Anonymous attendee, are there any situations where PER is not required? Yeah, it depends on your employer. Anonymous attendee, your employer can put you in a position subject to their relationship with the ACCA where the PER is not required, or the performance objectives are not required. Okay, there's detail on that within the PDFs that I showed you. Okay, William Do, what if my manager refuses to sign off my time and objectives and there's no other managers or external auditors? Well, William, my question with that is, why would a manager do that? Yeah, why would a manager do that? I don't understand why a manager would do that, or if you will, William, want to be seen to do that. I don't think a person, a manager, would want to be seen to do that. So, William, if you are in that position, I mean, this is a good point, everybody, that William makes. William's saying, what if the manager refuses to sign off the time and objectives? Well, William, what I would be doing quietly is to get the manager to put that in writing. In other words, get them to email you and say, hi, William, actually, in relation to your request, I will not sign off your time and objectives. Okay, let's just say if the person is willing to put that in writing, because if someone puts that in writing, William, I think they're in a tricky position, particularly if your time and and indeed your experience is good. Okay, that would be my advice. Kelvin, what happens if you can't find your supervisor that you worked with in 1999? Then, Kelvin, what I would be doing is I would try to find someone else. Okay, if we can't find that person, remember that there are other options for supervisors. For example, an external accountant, a consultant, or another manager. That's my suggestion. A non attendee, Big Four 10 years. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Excuse me. Excuse me. Oh, I have a very bad cold. Oh dear. Excuse me. I hope that answers all your questions. Lucy, no, not everyone. You basically need to show Lucy over the course of 3 years that you tick the box across the nine objectives, not that you're pumping each one continuously over a 3-year period. Okay, William, you're saying your manager has a dispute with ACCA. Okay, William, so you're saying that in relation to, excuse me, your manager not wanting to sign off, he has a dispute with the ACCA. Well, I mean, if he has a dispute with the ACCA, then as far as I would be concerned, William, unless that dispute is specifically to do with you, i.e., you're the cause of it or you're involved in it, then your sign off or his sign off of your experience has nothing to do with the dispute that he has directly with the ACCA. So I don't think that's a reasonable approach on his part to be affecting your sign off because of a dispute that he has. That's my point. Excuse me. Okay, anonymous attendee. I've been wrong for 3 years. My manager just started. Are they okay to sign off my time? I think you would be going back to previous line managers, anonymous attendee. So you were saying you're in your role for 3 years. Your current manager has just started, therefore they weren't around for the previous 3 years. I think you need to go back to previous line managers. Absolutely. Because if your current manager was not around, they can't really vouch for time and experience when they weren't there. Not at all. Okay. I hope that helps. Other questions? I mean, these are good questions. These are good questions. Other questions? Do we have more? Or are we done? Are we good? Okay. Looks like we may be good. We're just after the allotted time, or just after the final time. Okay. Well, what I'll do is let me close up now. Apologies for my cold. Excuse me. Okay, my thoughts are as follows. Oh, have we got one more question in? Nadia Siddiq, can you get, yes, you can do. You can get it signed off one at a time. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, Nadia. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to sign off now. Firstly, thank you for coming. Thank you for bearing with my cold, which is bad. I hope that you found the webinar helpful and that I've answered some questions that you had and provided some guidance. Maybe I'll see you at some point in the future at Viva Tuition in your studies. Good luck with your ACCA per application. And do remember my very first point from the off, that this is a writing exercise, and don't think in the negative when you start it off. Think in the positive. Okay, you're not guilty until you're proven innocent. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. Okay, So listen, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Maybe I'll see you in another webinar in due course. Thank you, Sophia. I'm glad it was helpful, everyone. Thank you. I'm not 100% fit and healthy. Maybe I could have done better, but I've done my best. And it's been fine. It's fine, apart from my coughing. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Nadia. Okay, cheers, everybody. Good luck. Good luck with your power. Cheers.